Hi, I am Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, August 1st, 2025. We got a ton of great stuff coming up this week. I'm actually in the middle of writing up the SCI earnings call, so we're going to chat about that a little bit, plus lots of other stuff to get into. But before that, we're going to have a message from our friends and sponsors at Starmark.
Funeral service is more than a profession. It's a calling. Starmark understands the care, dignity, and efficiency you need to provide for the families you serve. That's why we specialize in sensible product solutions designed to meet your needs. If you're looking for sustainable, economical, and efficient container and casket solutions, Starmark is here to support you. Because presentation means everything, you deserve a partner you can trust. Starmark, the cremation solutions leader. Visit starmarkcp.com today and discover the difference.
Service Corporation International had its second quarter earnings call on July 31st, and there was a ton of stuff to get out of it, and I'll get into most of that in Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter. But some of the things that you want to know just off the bat, the adjusted EPS of 88 cents was up 11% from 79 cents in the second quarter of 2024. The funeral segment was up almost 15%, and what was really interesting about that is there was a little bit more than a 3% increase in average funeral sales, and what they've attributed this to is upselling and making the most out of cremation sales, which they went into in great detail and have the last couple months. Cemetery pre-need sales were up 5%. A lot of their pre-need package sales were down, though, as they continue to go through this training with the new program that they have. SCI has been rolling out a new pre-need program in partnership with Global Atlantic, and most, if not all, of the funeral homes are pretty much on board, and now they're going after the cemeteries. And so that is going to show up in reduced cemetery pre-need sales for much of the rest of the year, although they expect to be back on track in either late Q3 or early Q4. We will get into all of that when those things happen. But for right now, if you're a subscriber, you can get into all of the details in this week's Funeral Service Insider story on the matter, and we will link to that in the show notes. The Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science has named its new president. You will recall that back in March, the president of the school, Jack Lechner Jr., stepped down after a board meeting. He had been under some pressure from the students and didn't want to be any more of a distraction as the year went on. Paula Masters had stepped up, who was on the board, stepped up into his shoes while they looked for a new president, and now they've named Mark Ivy as his successor. Ivy has more than 25 years experience in higher education, and he, according to the press release, is known for fostering collaboration, advancing student success, and creating sustainable institutional change. We hope to speak with Mr. Ivy about this before too long for a feature in Funeral Service Insider. But until then, there is a release from the school available if you follow the link in the show notes. Last week, we told you that Tukios had taken over Batesville's website development product and was in the middle of a transition. We're still working on that story, but this week, Batesville announced that its Halcyon death care management software solution had been integrated with Georgia's electronic death registration system. One expects that this is the first of several, probably something like 50, announcements of these kind of integration. What's interesting, though, is if Batesville is out of the website development business, it seems to be doubling down on the management system business, which is very exciting. And I spoke with Batesville earlier this week, and we hope to have a story out on that in the coming weeks. Stay tuned right here for that. But in the meantime, there's a link to their announcements in the show notes. We read this week that Dr. Mafundu Mokoe-Zandu has made history as the first woman ever elected president of the South African Funeral Practitioners Association. They're calling it a milestone in the group's 25-year history. But Dr. Mokoe-Zandu is not, I don't want to say just a funeral director. She is the CEO and chairperson of, and I want to make sure that I get this pronunciation right, the Kates-Boylston group. Now, taking nothing away from her accomplishment becoming the first woman president of the association, I also would love to encourage you to visit the Kates-Boylston group's website, because they have a really interesting kind of all-life approach. They call the full life cycle products. And they have a section for while alive, at passing, and afterlife. And it is a different culture, and there are different, needs and wants that come. But one of the things that you can include in your pre-need plan, if you make one with them, is a year's worth of grocery money for your family when you die. There are tombstones, there is regular funerary things available, but it is a really interesting approach to death care and aftercare and pre-need, and it is all in one group. They have, health kind of things. It's really interesting to see how they've gone about this, because as, funeral homes here struggle with how to, do more celebration of life kind of events. This approach is start very early and keep the whole family all the time. So take a look at the news story, which is linked in the show notes. I would like to say other highlights is she's outlined a 100-day agenda for her first 100 days in office, and she wants to establish a strategic plan. She wants to establish a women's and youth desk, and then she wants to do a better job at making sure that everyone is complying with all of the funeral laws in the country. So take a look at the story, take a look at the website. This is something that's really worth at least knowing about. Link in the show notes. The saga in Texas surrounding the Texas Funeral Service Commission continues, and no sooner had I put out last week's episode than we were informed that staff attorneys Christopher Burnett and Sarah Sanders, along with Deputy Director Laura Reinhart, were all also fired for their support of former Director Scott Bingaman. They alleged that their dismissal was retaliation, and it was orchestrated by Commission Chair Kristen Tips. They accused her of unethical conduct, self-dealing, and using her position to benefit her own funeral business. These are some of the accusations that Bingaman had leveled previously as well. You may recall from last time that his accusation was that she was pushing for more state regulations that had to do with not holding funeral homes accountable for pain and suffering in cases of funeral home mishaps. So while I honestly thought this would probably go away since they had just fired the executive director, firing the lawyers as well, and having the lawyers be out and so vocal about it means that this is probably not going away anytime soon. There is a link to the most recent story in the show notes, and in that story, Ms. Tips has not responded to questions regarding these firings. But we'll keep our ear to the ground, and if there's anything more to tell you, we will tell you next week. Right now, there's a link to this story in the show notes. In the Troy, New York area, a funeral home owner has been indicted on 11 counts of alleged income tax fraud and failure to maintain proper financial records. Authorities allege that Gideon Richardson failed to file state tax returns starting in 2020 and did not retain business books and records between 2017 and 2020. He has resigned from his role as the St. Jacob Village trustee. St. Jacob is an area not far from Troy. And there are accusations that he doesn't even live in St. Jacob Village either. And it's just, this is another one of those cases of extreme bad luck catching up, I think, to, less than great planning. This Mr. Richardson is 68 years old, and as part of the investigation, they also revealed that he neglected to renew his funeral director's license in 2021. Now, this could be just a simple case of whatever fraud or tax evasion, but one of the things that we've mentioned before, and I'd like to continue to mention because I think it's worth at least considering, is that there are places, we hear all the time that run a little fast and loose with their pre-need. And it really feels to me a lot like a culture shift that some of these older funeral directors are caught short on. This notion that, well, I'll be in the business forever, so if I spend this money, I'll just give them a free funeral when they show up. We have seen that before. We don't know if that's what's happening here. But this is, again, it looks more like a case of someone who was too far behind and didn't ask for help, more than someone who was just, out to perform bad deeds for bad reasons. While he resigned from his position on the St. Jacob Village Council, he did not comment further on the indictment, and it says right at the bottom of the story, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. But even if this is just a question of bad paperwork, it really still goes to this notion that people are falling behind in ways that they never intended, and there are real-world consequences that are now kind of associated with that. So there's a link to the story in the show notes. If anything else happens, I would be happy to share it with you as we keep our eye on this story as well. The city of Monroe, North Carolina, is relocating approximately 50 graves from the historic Billy Woods Cemetery. This was a cemetery that they didn't know was there until after they bought the property. The town bought the property in 2018 with the notion of having it converted into something economic developy. A lot of times towns do this. They'll annex it with this, build it, and they will come kind of attitude. There was no mention of specifically what they were going to build, but there was a problem of all of these graves. So the town had reached out to the more than 170 descendants of the people that it discovered were buried in this historic cemetery. Only 15 of them responded. And of course, as always in stories like this, there is a question of whether all 170 were reached. According to the news story that we have linked in the show notes, a woman named Lori Deans, who has relatives buried at the Billy Woods Cemetery, said she was never notified about the removal and only learned about it when she read about it in the paper. She said she would have opposed the move and wanted a chance to explore other options. This is a ball that has been rolling downhill for too long to be stopped, apparently. The relocation will be conducted by an archaeologist and a funeral director. The graves are being moved manually over a 3-day period, and they're going to attempt to place them in essentially the same configuration, if not literally in the same place. And that is the best that these families are going to get. It's increasingly feeling like we're not going more than 6 months or so before a town or a developer comes across a lost cemetery and wants to move it so they can put up their buildings. And it's interesting because it really does have to do with how well people are paying attention to what's going on in their towns. But of course, a lot of towns don't have reporting on things like zoning and planning or even the town council anymore. So it's hard to know what's going on until it's too late, which seems to benefit the government here. And that is going to have to be okay. Anyway, link to that story in the show notes. It's rare that I delete posts that I make for this story, but this is one case where I did, and it was just recently. The thing is, I fell for an incendiary headline and responded incendiarily, and I didn't want to, so I have deleted the post, but there is a link to this story in the show notes. The headline is, "Does the funeral industry exploit vulnerability during loss?" And the answer is yes. But if you read the story, and this is from Psychology Today, it reads like they came up with a disease and needed symptoms for it. And the disease is called DRSC, and that's titled Death-Related Status Consumption. And I can't tell you how dumb this is. Oh, I guess I can. It's dumb. And what makes it dumb is that we are a country of conspicuous consumption. It's one of the things that we tend to be proud of. But this is a cultural thing. It is not specifically a death care thing. I think that if you want to say that people always feel weird spending this much money without having the chance to really think about it, I would like to tell you that that is an upper middle class problem. For those of us in the lower middle classes, if your car dies, guess what? You have to make a $10,000 decision that day. And it is not as if the funeral industry doesn't make more than its share of efforts to try to get people to pre-plan and prepay, or at least to pre-plan. If I can continue the car analogy, you can drive around with your car making all sorts of horrible noises and pretend that it's not going to die, but then you can't also complain that you're put on the spot to spend a bunch of money when it actually does. Anyway, there is a link to the story in the show notes against my better judgment, because I really feel like this is just clickbaity, and I don't think that there's any world where this is a real disease or a real diagnosis or even a real problem. But I brought it up, so I will share the link with you, and you can read it for yourself and get your own take on it. And if you have anything from that take that you'd like to share with me, I would love to hear it. You can always reach out to me via email in the show notes, or you can call and leave a message at 732-746-0233, extension 709. That is 732-746-0233, extension 709. I'm happy to keep comments in confidence if you want me to keep it in confidence, or if you want me to just play a tape of what you say on the show, I'm happy to do that as well. Just let me know. And that will do it for this time. In case you missed, it is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. It was not videoed this week. We had technical difficulties. Sorry if you didn't get to see my big red face on YouTube, but I will have it back there next week, I promise. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. It is always a pleasure to see our numbers grow week by week, and they are growing week by week, and it's really gratifying. So thank you for listening, and thank you for listening every week. And to those of you who have been hitting me up with little insights and comments, I get them, and they are so welcome. I can't even tell you. But that will do me for this time. We will catch you Monday with an episode of Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, and we'll be back with In Case You Missed It next time.